What's going on, young people? This is our second homework video for Unit 8, which is about clinical psychology, so studying psychological disorders and treatments. Today we're going to talk about dissociative disorders, and we're going to talk about mood disorders, okay? So make sure that you get this done. Tuesday is supposed to be Digital Learning Day, so check your mind, B-Day folks, to see what we're going to be doing for that, all right? We have 4 slides and notes, 4 sections today. Let's start off by looking at those DSM-5 chapters, okay? I said mood disorders and dissociative disorders. So can you guess which chapters we're going to be talking about today? One of them is pretty obvious, but you might have to look a little hard to try and figure out the others. So what we have here, the mood disorders are 2 different chapters, okay? Bipolar disorders and depressive disorders related to depression. And then there's just a simple chapter on dissociative disorders that we'll be talking about as well. So let's start off by talking about mood disorders. Around 15% of the population could be diagnosed with a mood disorder. So much larger than schizophrenia, but not as widespread as anxiety or substance use disorders. So when we talk about mood disorders, we're talking about people's emotions, okay? A fancy word for emotion is somebody's affect. Affect. These are called affective disturbances. It's like what affects you, right? Affect. It's how you present your emotion. So you don't need to write these down because we're gonna have a slide on each, but the 2 types of mood disorders are depressive disorders, right? Marked by the blues, feeling bad. And then we have bipolar disorders, which are marked by shifts and changes in mood, okay? So some of these words here, euthymia is someone who does not have a lot of emotion. So this graph shows how polarized, how extreme your mood is. So euthymia, not feeling much. Depression, below the line. Mania is the form of mood when you are way above the line, very optimistic and excited with an incredibly positive mood. We have hypomania, which is like a smaller version of mania. So bipolar disorder we'll talk about is about shifts in mood that occur rapidly. So depressive disorders, we're already on Roman numeral 2 out of 4. Depressive disorders related to depression, okay? Which, as y'all know, is increasing among young people. This was true before COVID, and it's even more true since we've had this social isolation. Depression is 2 times higher in women than men. Think about why might that be? We'll talk about that in class. So the first type of depressive disorder, the most serious type, is called MDD, major depressive disorder. Put a star by it. It's just like incredibly deep depression. It slows your thinking. It slows the way you feel about yourself, and things that used to bring you joy no longer bring you joy. People with MDD might not be able to get out of bed in the mornings because they just do not have the motivation to do the things that they used to do, okay? This is the most severe, chronic, problematic form of depressive disorder. Now, there are forms of depression that are not as debilitating. Dysthymia or dysthymic disorder is a form of depression that is still long-term and still is worth being diagnosed and treated for, but it is not as severe. These folks might still be coming to school or attending their classes or going to their job, but they are not experiencing the joy that they used to, okay? So maybe still some motivation concern, not as severe as MDD. We've talked about other forms of depression this year. Postpartum depression, post meaning after. So after a pregnancy, mothers can be diagnosed in the DSM-5 with a depressive disorder so that they can get that treatment that they might need. And then I think I've mentioned this in passing, especially this time of year, but seasonal affect disorder. Have y'all noticed that as the days have gotten warmer and the sun has been out, right? Those days this past week when it was really nice out, that your mood was improved? There's something called seasonal affect disorder. It's the idea that when we are in the heart of winter, when it's cold out, when you're not getting as much sunlight, it actually impacts the vitamins that your body produces and what your brain takes in, how your brain sees the world. And that can actually impact the way you think, the way you feel, and that can be something that we can diagnose, okay? So one of the toughest things about depression is that it's a mood disorder, but if you're suffering from depression, it also impacts your thinking. And what happens is we develop what's called a depressive explanatory style. the way we explain things that happen to us is impacted by our moods. I know this is hard to see. There's nothing to write on this slide. I just want y'all to think about and realize that when something problematic happens, so this example here says, when you break up with a romantic partner, okay, there are 3 ways that your brain can think about this negative event, right? If you have a healthy explanatory style, right? If you're thinking clearly and rationally and logically, you know that this thing, and I'll put this up in class, but it's temporary, right? The pain's not going to last. It is specific. One bad thing may be happening, but it does not mean that all things about your life are bad. And it's external, meaning it's probably not your fault. It wasn't within your control. There's nothing you can do about it. So it's okay to move on and cope and deal with this negative thing, breaking up with a romantic partner. The problem with depression and what makes it so tough for people is that it changes their thinking. So when bad things happen, like breaking up with a romantic partner, they think that instead of it being a temporary pain, it's as if they think this thing is going to last forever. Instead of them only being concerned about this one area of their life, but realizing that other areas of life are good, they consider this pain to be global, right? This one thing is bad, and all these other things about my life are hard as well. The third thing that's problematic is when negative things happen, folks who are dealing with depression, their thinking becomes internal. They blame themselves. They feel like it was their fault, that there was something they could have done to fix the problem, and this can lead to a depressive spiral, okay? So we need to be aware of when folks are struggling with depression, it's not just about their mood, but it's also about their thinking, okay? And we'll talk more about that in class, okay? So the other kind of mood disorder, besides depressive disorders, we call them bipolar disorders. So bipolar, BI, always refers to 2, right? So a bicycle has 2 wheels. A bimodal graph has 2 modes. Bipolar, 2 extremes, okay? Mania, I mentioned, is an incredibly high positive mood. Depression would be the low mood, okay? So there used to be something called bipolar, there used to be something called manic depression, manic depressive state. They now refer to that as bipolar 1, okay? And then you can also have what's called bipolar 2. So bipolar 1 is the most extreme form of bipolar disorder, okay? Where you have mania and depression, from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. Bipolar 2, it's not as extreme. So you could have mania and euthymia, right? That like stable, no extreme emotions. You could have hypomania, meaning like a little bit of mania with a little bit of depression. You could have go back and forth between euthymia and depression. So all those forms of less severe bipolar disorder are called bipolar 2. About 4 to 9% of adults can be diagnosed with this. And bipolar disorder is very genetic. So what they have found is that if you have one parent who's been diagnosed, there's about a 1 in 4 chance that you could be diagnosed at some point in your life. However, if both parents have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, it increases your odds to 50 to 75% that you could be diagnosed at some point during your life, okay? So very genetic. If you inherit these traits from your parents, your biological folks, that's going to make you more likely to develop as well. And twin research has shown this, right? If one sibling has it, well, you only have about a 1 in 5 chance of getting it. But if you share your DNA with someone who's been diagnosed, 70% chance that you also will have that disorder diagnosed. So be aware of that. All right. When we talk about the mood disorders, any of y'all ever watched Winnie the Pooh? Okay, are you familiar with the characters, right? We have Owl and Christopher Robin and Kanga, and Little Roo and Tigger and Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh and Piglet and Rabbit. Well, I hate to ruin Winnie the Pooh for you, but some folks think that the characters in Winnie the Pooh, that some of them have some mood disorders, some different psychological disorders, some anxiety disorders as well. So what I want you to do is pause this and try and match these 8 characters. Try and match them up with 8 different disorders. And I know that we have not yet talked about dependent personality disorder, and I know that we've not talked yet about schizophrenia, but we have talked about the psychosexual stages, and we've talked about social anxiety a little bit. So I think that you can maybe match these folks up. We'll talk about the answers in class. Go ahead and pause it though, give it a try. Cool. The last section of class today, I want to talk about the dissociative disorders. And these are some of the most fascinating, interesting disorders that scientists don't fully understand, okay? So the most common, the most famous one is called DID. Put a star by this one. Dissociative identity disorder, DID, sometimes called multiple personality disorder. okay? And I might show you a video or two in class about this. But you probably have heard or seen movies, right? Like, did any of y'all see the film Split? I know it came out a while back, right? I hope you haven't seen it, right? Terrible movie. Y'all know that I don't like scary movies. I'm not a thrill seeker, right? There's some problematic things in this film. Over 20,000 people signed a petition boycotting this movie because of the way that it inaccurately portrays mental illness, right? Making it seem like people who have a psychological disorder, that they're serial killers, and that this is the way that the disorder manifests. Not true, not necessarily the case, not the best example of this. So we might do some reading in class to kind of look more about that. The idea here is that oftentimes, because someone has experienced trauma or some sort of abuse when they were younger, or some sort of stress as an adult, that what happened is, and this is kind of a Freudian idea, but that to protect themselves, the body sort of divides up different aspects of the way they feel about the world within their consciousness, right? So like we've talked about how you have a right brain and a left brain, right? It's almost like different parts of the brain become dedicated to certain aspects of your personality, to the point where they almost seem like different people within you, right? It's different parts of your personality, but they can be kind of divided within you. So this idea of dissociation means like there is a split within you in terms of how you interact with the world and view the world, okay? So come with your questions in class. We'll talk more about this, okay? The second dissociative disorder is called dissociative amnesia. Now, we've talked about amnesia before, where like you might have some sort of a trauma or an incident. You might get hit in the head with a baseball or be in a car accident. And then we talked about like retroactive amnesia. And we talked about, proactive, anterograde amnesia, right? We've talked about forgetting things in the past. Dissociative amnesia is when this does not come out because of a physical incident, but often to the result, again, of trauma or abuse of some sort, okay? So amnesia, you are forgetting things. You can't recall all the things that you used to be able to remember. And there's one form of this called dissociative fugue. If you'll circle that word, and it has the same root, F-U-G, as the word fugitive. An individual who wanders around, who is on the run, who is trying to escape. The idea of dissociative fugue is not just that you have forgotten things, but that you have forgotten things and you like go to a new place. All right, so we'll talk in class about instances of individuals who have like shown up somewhere new, having forgotten what's happened in the past to them. So y'all ever seen like the Bourne movies, Bourne Identity? That's kind of idea of like dissociative fugue, right? You've forgotten things and you're going someplace new. You've forgotten who you are starting over. Third form of dissociative disorder is called depersonalization. So while this one is about how your personality is kind of divided up, and this is about how your memories are divided up, this is about how sometimes you feel like your thinking is divided from your body, okay? Folks who have depersonalization disorder will sometimes feel like they are almost floating outside of their physical body. They can look down their body. They're no longer part of their body, but their consciousness is somewhere else, okay? To be diagnosed with any of these disorders, notes, okay? Your experience of dissociation cannot be because of intense prayer or meditation or some sort of cultural practice, okay? So if you, while praying or worshiping, feel like you are leaving your body, or that you're forgetting some aspect of that you have different people inside of you, that would not be a psychological clinical disorder. Similarly, if you are taking some sort of substance or drugs, or again, if you get hit in the head with a baseball, you would not be diagnosed with a dissociative disorder for having memory loss or for having these splits in your personality or in the way that you feel your body. To be diagnosed, it can only be a mental thing, right? A psychological thing. So the treatment is tough. They say that some forms of psychotherapy, some forms of talk therapy might be able to help people reintegrate the dissociated aspects of themselves. In other cases, people just need medication to help with the symptoms, right? The anxiety or the depression or the difficulties in thinking that come about because of these dissociative disorders. So psychotherapy, medication are the things that we keep coming back to for treatments. All right. See if you can answer these questions. Number 1 and 2 are from the notes. Number 3 and 4 are just your opinion. So we'll go over those together in class. And then also, I want you to look at these scenarios here. So you may need to pause it or rewind and go back, but we'll talk about these in class. But what I have here are 6 different scenarios. This is what your test questions will look like, okay? You'll kind of have to be diagnosing someone based on the information and the story provided. So again, there are 6 scenarios here, and I want you to try and match them up with the various terms that we have gone over in class today or that we went over in our last video, okay? Good luck. Email me if you have any questions. Appreciate y'all. Peace out.